I'm going to try something here, and as always with any new experiment, who knows whether this will be a good idea or not. I guess we'll find out as I do it. But I'm going to try to keep up a running commentary on the Game of Thrones episodes. That is, kind of after each episode airs this season, chime in with my 2 cents as kind of a video review. I've not really done this before. I mean, I've been reviewing loads of stuff on this YouTube channel. But I've not attempted to review a television season episode by episode as it comes out. But I was thinking that at this point, the Game of Thrones is enough of a cultural phenomenon, and kind of everybody is talking about it, just kind of in every kind of workplace or office kind of around the world. And I do mean around the world, actually. I'm living in Vietnam here, and you know, these shows are airing in Vietnam with Vietnamese subtitles. So like, and I imagine that's kind of true in every country now. Obviously, you still need to get access to HBO, or it's everywhere on the internet, isn't it? Point being, it really is all around the world at this point, and I can attest to it, living in Vietnam, that a lot of my Vietnamese friends are just as addicted to this show as we are back in America. So, point being, it's a global phenomenon at this point. Everybody is going to be talking about these episodes every week as they come out, and so why not chime in with my 2 cents? Actually, let me answer that rhetorical question. The obvious reason why not is because on any given week, I might not have anything intelligent to say, at which point I'm just kind of wasting everyone's time. But I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to try and say something about each episode, and maybe I'll have something intelligent to say, and maybe I won't. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know that these video reviews are kind of hit and miss, because sometimes I really don't have anything intelligent to say and start rambling a little bit like I'm doing now. I'm going to give it a try, though. Let me give a little bit more background information on kind of my thoughts on this series as a whole, or maybe why I'm doing it. Right. So this season 8 is coming out, and there was a lot of talk in my workplace before this even came out. And again, to just kind of re-emphasize that this is truly global at this point. I teach English in Vietnam, so I work in a school where we've got language teachers from all over the world, right? Like Britain, Scotland. My Scottish friend is going to kill me now. He keeps reminding me that Scotland is actually part of Britain. England, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, in addition to kind of the Vietnamese people who are also watching these shows. Anyways, somebody got the idea to start off an office pool. You kind of tick which characters you think are going to live and which characters you think are going to die, and everyone puts in $5 to the pool, and half of it goes to charity, and then half of it goes to the winner. And because it goes to charity, my manager was pressuring me a little bit to sign up. And I was like, I am so busy this year. I mean, I don't even want to get into all the stuff that I'm way behind on that I should be working on at this moment. And I said, I might not watch it this year. And everyone was like, kind of like, what? It's the final season. And my manager said to me, if you don't watch it this year, you are just going to have to avoid all social media and kind of all conversations and just kind of lock yourself away in a hole. And the more I thought about it, the more he was right. I mean, like, I pretty much have to watch it this year. I mean, I know it's a huge time commitment. Well, it's only an hour a week. But if you add it all together, it adds up to a significant amount of time, because it's a TV season, not like a 2-hour movie. But as busy as I am, you know, at this point in our lives, in my life, in our lives, we all have collectively invested so much time in this series that we really can't stop now. I mean, I can't say, no, I'm not going to watch the final season, because all those kind of hours of watching up until now represent an investment of some sort. And if I'm going to watch it, I thought I might as well feedback on it, produce a video or something kind of giving my thoughts. Yeah, and I guess kind of this maybe feeds into that age-old question. Is watching TV a waste of time or not? I mean, certainly when I was growing up as a kid, we were always taught by our parents and teachers and everything that watching TV was a waste of time. I mean, you could do it a little bit because everyone was entitled to waste some time during the day for relaxation or something like that. But essentially it was a waste of time, and we'd be much better off kind of studying math or reading a novel or kind of brushing up on the classics or something like that. That was a view of the old generation. I think the generation kind of coming through now, meaning people my age and younger, have kind of adapted the idea that a well-crafted television series like Breaking Bad or The Wire or Game of Thrones is actually equivalent to reading a novel. Now, not equivalent necessarily in the sense that the cognitive demand is the same, but the sense that this is some sort of work of narrative art, and that kind of engaging with it is kind of part of engaging with any kind of other art, or the human experience, or kind of our drive for stories and stuff like that. And there's an argument to that. Certainly, like when we were growing up in the 80s, television really was dreck. I mean, it was an absolute vapid waste of time, talking about the TV shows that were on television during the 1980s. Now, I'm not the first person to point this out, of course, but we are living in the kind of so-called golden age of television, which isn't to say that there's not still a lot of crap on the air, but there's also a lot of very good TV. Everybody kind of knows what shows these are. Well, sorry, that's not true, because there's so much good stuff on TV that nobody can watch all of it. But everybody knows the cliche examples. Breaking Bad, The Wire, Westworld, obviously, and Game of Thrones, yeah. So it does seem that the conventional wisdom, at least of kind of younger folks, is that this is not a waste of time. This is kind of a legitimate art form. These are well-crafted stories, and you're not wasting your time with this any more than you're kind of wasting your time reading a novel. Yeah, I don't know. Certainly, in terms of like the level of story, yeah. Nobody could argue against this. In terms of narrative sophistication, Game of Thrones is equal to kind of any novel, which is obviously because it was based on a novel. So I guess there's that, huh? Could there be a TV show with the same level of sophistication that wasn't based on a novel, that was just made up of screenwriters? Well, obviously there could, and there are, right? Breaking Bad, The Wire. And at this point, Game of Thrones itself has kind of diverged paths from the novels it was based on. So, yeah, I guess the point being, even though it was based on a novel, I think you could still say it has a sophistication equivalent to a novel, and this kind of justifies the medium of television. The thing is, though, and I don't know how much to make of this, anybody can watch a TV show. I mean, like any idiot can sit down and just watch an hour of TV. Whereas it takes a level of kind of concentration, and what's the word I want to use? Concentration or control or attention, or I don't know, there's some sort of word I'm not thinking of right now, but the ability to kind of self-control, maybe that's the word, the ability to kind of sit down and concentrate on a book for an hour at a time, the ability of self-control to get yourself to do that is kind of much more than the level of self-control required to kind of watch an hour of TV, which is to say there's very little self-control required to sit down and watch an hour of TV. I mean, maybe with people who have severe attention deficit disorders or something like that, even sitting down for an hour of TV is a chore. But for most of us, television, the cognitive burden required to watch television is so low that for most of us, it's just mindless. It's just no effort at all. Whereas reading a book is an effort. So what does that mean? I mean, I don't know. Like, it could mean that if we kind of shift from kind of reading to watching TV, then in like 100 years, we're going to find out that humans have lost some sort of like cognitive ability that previous generations had kind of trained up. That's assuming, of course, that it's an either-or situation, and many people are reading the books and watching the TV show. So I guess at this point it becomes more of a question of an individual. Am I, as an individual, kind of losing something by watching TV instead of reading the books? And maybe I am. There's obviously a split now between the Game of Thrones fans who have read the books and the Game of Thrones fans who have just watched the TV show. And maybe that represents kind of a difference in maybe not cognitive ability, but self-control or attention, ability to pay attention to a book or something. I'm ashamed to say I'm one of those people who was never able to read the books. Like, right, when season 1 came out and everyone was getting addicted to this, a lot of people tried to pick up the books. And a number of my friends were able to finish off all these books. I'm ashamed to say that I am of the number that actually wasn't able to finish the books. Sorry, excuse me. Meaning, like, I picked up the first book and I got a few pages into it, a few chapters into it, and I thought, this is boring. This is just exactly the same show that the same story that I just watched on TV, except it's happening much slower, and the effort required to get into it for myself is much more, because, you know, with a book, you've got to put in a lot more effort. You don't have all the visuals kind of spoon-fed to you. Sorry, it's a little bit hot in here. Hopefully, forgive me for this towel occasionally. Right, so where was I going with that? Where was I going with that? I guess the point is, I'm not sure whether this is all a waste of time or not, kind of all this time I've invested in this TV show. And for some reason, I felt the need to kind of get all that out of the way. That being said, at this point, this is season 8, so at this point, no use kind of rethinking this all now. At this point, I'm invested. I'm going to try and watch the series. And I'll try and put out these reviews as I go along. Now, there's a few more complicating factors. One, we've got a baby in the apartment now. So I'm not kind of guaranteed peace and quiet for 1 hour every week. This morning, I say this morning because I'm watching this in Vietnam, so it came out Monday morning, Vietnamese time. This morning she was nice and quiet, relatively, so I was able to kind of watch the show. But next week, who knows? The other thing is we've got a couple different trips planned. Well, one trip planned, etc. So I guess if I don't get all these out, I don't get all these out. But to the extent that I have time to watch it every week and make a video review, I'll try and do it because, yeah, at this point I think it's a big enough cultural phenomenon to justify it. Oh, I mentioned that my manager was starting up a pool. Well, it's not really a pool. Oh, no, is it a pool? You kind of check down which characters you think are going to live or die, and then I guess you get a point for every prediction that was correct. These sheets were being passed out where all the surviving characters were on them. And because it had been a couple of years since the last season, you know, I'm one of these people who kind of between seasons, I kind of forget a little bit who everyone is. I was like, all right, who is this character again, and who is this character? And when somebody reminded me, I was like, oh yeah. But I needed a little help being reminded. And what I eventually decided to do, I decided, you know what, I may lose the Office pool on this, but I don't want to actually be rooting for any character to die. I want to just kind of check that everyone is going to live, and that way it'll... I mean, I know the whole point of kind of doing this is it increases the fun of watching the TV show, because in addition to just a story, now you've kind of got predictions writing on it. But I thought, I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm kind of actively cheering for a character to die, because that will increase my likelihood of winning this pool. So I'll just check that everyone was going to live, with 3 exceptions. The Night King, because obviously you want him to die. And then the Greyjoy, Euron Greyjoy. The TV show has done a pretty good job of kind of making all the characters somewhat sympathetic, even kind of the bad characters. But there are a couple exceptions. Joffrey, of course, Joffrey died a long time ago, but Joffrey had no redeeming qualities. And Euron Greyjoy seems to have no redeeming qualities. Cersei, I actually checked that she would live, because I thought she has had some redeeming qualities. She has been portrayed as sympathetic at various points in the show. And so, like, I didn't want to... I thought, yeah, I'll kind of put myself hoping that she lives. We had to complete these before the first season aired. Now that the first episode has just aired and I've just watched it, I thought to myself, oh, they seem to be setting Cersei up as being the real villain of this season. So maybe that was an error on my part in kind of checking that she would live. And then the Mountain, because my manager actually reminded me about this. He's like, well, what about the Mountain? You don't want the Mountain to live, do you? And I thought, what is... The Mountain's essentially like a zombie at this point in the story anyways, right? But I thought, all right, he doesn't have any redeeming qualities at this point. So I checked that, yeah, Euron Greyjoy, the Mountain, and the Night King, I hope they would die. Everybody else, I'm just decided I was going to check and hope that they will live. That was not a strategic decision. But I don't know. There's an element, maybe, where I'm thinking this might be something that pays off. The argument would be, a lot of people noted in the previous season, season 7, the death count was a lot lower. And some people, kind of people who are commenting about this online, critics and stuff like that, were noting that during the first few seasons, you could kill off a main character for shock value, and it kind of worked. I mean, it shocked the audience, but that kind of shock worked in a sense. But what's happening by season 7 and now season 8 is you've been following these characters through so many arcs, or kind of over one long arc, really. So many adventures, one long character arc, that you really at this point have to see that arc pay off. And this is maybe even especially true for the minor characters. Because, there are these minor characters that have been sticking around now, and they've been sticking around with some kind of expectation that their narrative arc is going to pay off in some form. And so you can't just kill them off suddenly anymore. People will be like, well, why was I following them for 7 seasons then? The major characters maybe are arguably more vulnerable than the minor characters, because the major characters have already kind of maybe completed a narrative arc. And you can kind of kill them off maybe more. So, with that logic, I don't know, they're probably... it'd be interesting to see what they do. Maybe they'll just kill a bunch of characters off just because they have a reputation to uphold and people expect it at this point. But if they did that, I would expect a lot more people to kind of die in some sort of final heroic gesture right at the end episode, or maybe the penultimate episode or something like that. We'll see what they do. Yeah. The other thing, Game of Thrones has been kind of notable for, especially kind of the first few seasons. You had all these different factions fighting against each other, but they were all kind of sympathetic in some way. The obvious exception being people like Joffrey. But even like the Lannisters, Cersei was sympathetic to some degree. Jaime had some kind of redeeming qualities, or at least was portrayed as being somewhat sympathetic. And I don't think this was Game of Thrones is the first show to do this, although it's the first show to do this on this kind of epic scale with this kind of big budget. But I believe this is what kind of daytime television dramas used to do. I never watched a lot of daytime television dramas. I was not in the target demographic for them. But this is what they used to do, right? They used to be several kind of characters, and they were all conflicting. But the writers would not set up obvious heroes and obvious villains. Well, I mean, they would. But they would also have just kind of a lot of kind of different characters who had different agendas and were sympathetic in their own way. And then people would form different factions, right? I'm supporting this character, I'm supporting this character, and it would be something people could argue about or talk about. And it also kind of increased the drama of these series because you didn't know which way the writers would go, right? Like if there was an obvious hero and an obvious villain, then obviously you know that the hero is going to overcome the villain, and that's going to be the story arc. But if it's a bit more murkier who is the hero and who is the villain, then it's not quite so clear where the writers are going to go, which increases the suspense and the tension a lot more. And I think Game of Thrones did that to some degree during their first few seasons. I mean, I say to some degree because obviously the Stark family was kind of the titular hero, and they did have kind of various villains that were kind of thrown up there. But there was things were a bit more murky. Now that we're heading towards kind of the final showdown, it is kind of maybe becoming a little bit more obvious who we're supposed to sympathize with and who we're supposed to root against. But that's fine. At Season 8, this is the final showdown. I spent all this time rambling, and I haven't even talked about the episode that just finished. Well, there's not too much to say, is there? Because this is largely an episode where nothing happened. I mean, one or two things happened, but largely nothing happened. It was just kind of a catching the viewer up to speed episode. Which, if I'm being quite honest, I needed. Because I was, I don't want to say I've forgotten completely between seasons, but it's grown a little bit foggy in my mind, especially with some of these minor characters. So it's nice to just kind of see everyone's face again, kind of be reminded, okay, this character is here, this character is there. There are all these reunions, which is something that happened in the previous season as well. I guess the show has been on for so long now that a lot of these characters haven't seen each other for a few years. I have long ago lost track of which characters haven't seen each other for years and which have and stuff like that. But the show reminds you, because it makes a big deal out of reunions so that you're like, oh yeah, that character hasn't seen that character for a few years, and kind of brings you up to speed. So it's arguably necessary. It's a bit boring, but we've had boring episodes in the past where the writers have been kind of setting things up and then stuff happens in the next episode. So I'm expecting the next episode to be more interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this goes. They're setting up, obviously, conflict between Jon Snow and... what is her name? The Targaryen woman, Daenerys Targaryen. Sorry, I'm gonna be. This is gonna be a common theme throughout these video reviews, as I'm gonna be forgetting characters' names and stuff like that. Though maybe as the season goes on, I'll remember it more. But my prediction is that well, I don't know. They're probably going to have increase the drama and have some sort of falling out, but then it'll all kind of come together at the end, I think. I think at this point we the audience have too much invested in like the arc of the Targaryen woman and Jon Snow to have kind of like one kill the other or something like that. I think they're both going to have to unite in some form. Now, one of the big shockers in the previous season is that they became lovers, even though we, the audience, knew that they were related. So we were like, oh, right, what are they going to do with this? And now in this show, Jon Snow kind of learns the history of who he really is. Yeah, that reveal was maybe a little bit anticlimactic for something that the show had kind of built up for so long, over so many years. To have it just kind of be told to him and him being like, huh, really? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I don't know. What else could they have done with it, really? Yeah, what else did I want to say about this episode? Yeah, I guess this is the danger of doing these reviews right after the episode airs, as I find out once I turn the camera on that I really don't have a lot of intelligent things to say about it. Yeah, so maybe I really don't have a lot of intelligent things to say about this episode. It was a little bit slow. I'm looking... I guess we'll see what happens in the kind of next episodes moving forward. Yeah, I'll just finish there. Maybe next week I'll have something more intelligent to say. But don't count on it.